Demi Moore. She almost lost everything before she ever had it. Demi Moore was a Brat Pack member, standing on the edge of stardom in St. Elmo's Fire. But her early battles with addiction nearly cost her that role entirely. She fought for it, and then she fought for everything else. In 1990, Ghost made her a global phenomenon. That pottery wheel, that pixie cut, that overwhelming love story. She became the highest-paid actress in Hollywood history, commanding $12.5 million for striptease. She refused to play it safe, shaving her head for G.I. Jane, posing pregnant on the cover of Vanity Fair, always 3 steps ahead of what the industry was willing to accept. Then came the painful years, 2 devastating divorces, battles with substance abuse, and a quiet unraveling. But at 63, Demi Moore is experiencing something genuinely rare, a full cultural resurrection. The substance in 2024 reminded the world exactly what she was. In 2026, with a Hollywood Walk of Fame star incoming and Landman on screens, she's not making a comeback. She's making a statement. Kim Basinger. In 1989, Kim Basinger did something no Hollywood actress had ever done. She bought an entire town, the entire town of Braselton, Georgia, for $20 million, planning to transform it into a movie-themed destination. It was the kind of audacious gesture that made perfect sense for a woman who had spent years fearlessly redefining Hollywood glamour. She had arrived in 1983 as a Bond girl in Never Say Never Again. That face, that presence, instantly iconic. Then came 9.5 weeks, demanding everything she had. But behind the shimmer, she was fighting severe agoraphobia and panic attacks that made every public appearance a private war. The failed film deal, the $8 million lawsuit, the bankruptcy, the brutal tabloid divorce from Alec Baldwin, the losses piled up relentlessly. But 1997 gave her something irreplaceable. L.A. Confidential gave her the Oscar. The town was gone. The marriage was gone. The gold statue stayed. At 72, she lives quietly near her daughter Ireland in Southern California, writing, mentoring, advocating for animals. A woman who survived everything the spotlight could throw at her. Salma Hayek. They told her she would never work. Her accent was too thick. She was too ethnic. The people making those decisions had simply never seen anyone quite like Salma Hayek walk into a room. Born in Mexico, and she had been a gymnastics prodigy, selected for the Olympic team as a child, before a completely different destiny pulled her into acting. She arrived in Hollywood with nothing but talent and sheer, immovable determination. In 1995, Desperado made the world sit up. That chemistry with Antonio Banderas felt like actual electricity on screen. But it was Frida in 2002, a passion project she spent years fighting studios to make, that proved she was never just a face. She was a filmmaker, a producer, a force of nature who refused to be categorized or contained. The system had called her unsuitable. She turned around and produced her own Oscar nomination. At 59, in 2026, Salma Hayek is gracing Sports Illustrated covers, preparing for her directorial debut, and building an industry legacy that Hollywood once told her she'd never be allowed to have. Leah Thompson. She played the same woman at 17, 47, and 77 in the same movie, and made you believe every single version. That is the kind of quiet magic Leah Thompson brought to Back to the Future in 1985, and to everything she has touched since. She was a ballerina first. Scholarship at the American Ballet Theater, a future seemingly mapped out, until someone told her at 19 that she was too stocky to be a prima ballerina. That particular cruelty redirected her toward acting, and the world of cinema was quietly, unknowingly, the beneficiary. Through Red Dawn and Some Kind of Wonderful and Caroline in the City, she built a career on warmth, intelligence, and a disarming likability that cameras simply adored. Yeah, but when Hollywood began offering women over 50 less and less, she didn't wait for the roles to arrive. She picked up a camera and started directing, helming episodes of The Goldbergs and Will Trent with complete authority. At 64 in 2026, Leah Thompson isn't chasing Hollywood. She is shaping it, quietly and entirely on her own terms. Heather Locklear. The high school cheerleading squad rejected her. She walked into the drama club instead, and somehow ended up on 2 primetime hit shows simultaneously. Heather Locklear, at 64, holds a television legacy that almost no actress can match. She was Dynasty's most seductive weapon and Melrose Place's mercurial heartbeat, all at once. As Samantha Jo Carrington and then the ruthless Amanda Woodward, she redefined what a television villain could look like. Glamorous, calculating, a completely irresistible. For nearly 2 decades, she was the standard by which primetime glamour was measured. But the private years were savage. The tabloids documented her unraveling, with a cruelty that showed no mercy: mental health crises, addiction, multiple hospitalizations. The woman who had once made jaws drop at every entrance was now fighting battles that had nothing to do with cameras or scripts. She fought them quietly. She fought them hard. Then, in March 2026, at a charity event, Heather Locklear walked a red carpet, radiant, composed, present. The audience erupted. Because some people don't just recover, they remind you of everything they always were. Penelope Cruz. She was 18 years old when she stepped in front of a camera for Jamón in 1992. Sharing the screen with the man who would eventually become her husband. And something on that set was already electric. Spain already knew Penelope Cruz was extraordinary. It took Hollywood a decade longer to figure it out. She arrived in American cinema facing the soft, persistent walls of typecasting. The Spanish beauty, the exotic accent, the eternal side role. She refused every version of that box. She studied her English meticulously. She went from Blow and Vanilla Sky to Vicky Cristina Barcelona in 2008, where she delivered a performance so ferociously alive, so completely unhinged in the best possible way, that the Academy had no choice but to hand her the Oscar. She became the only Spanish actress in history to earn both that award and a Hollywood Walk of Fame star. At 51, Penelope Cruz continues in prestigious projects like Michael Mann's Ferrari and remains the global face of Chanel, the most sophisticated kind of power there is. Sandra Bullock. The day after winning the Academy Award for Best Actress, Sandra Bullock showed up at the Razzie Awards to accept her Worst Actress trophy in person. She handed out DVDs of the film to the audience. That single moment tells you everything about what makes her so genuinely, durably beloved. She arrived in 1994 via Speed, charismatic, fast-thinking, effortlessly real, and spent the next 2 decades quietly building a production empire called Fortis Films, designed to give her complete creative control. She collected Oscar nominations, box office records, and a reputation for being the most likable person in any room. Then the ground shifted. In 2023, she lost her longtime partner Brian Randall, and the grief was real enough to pull her entirely from the spotlight. She needed time. She took it without apology. In 2026, at 61, she returns with Practical Magic 2 and a romantic thriller with Keanu Reeves, and somehow the wait has made it even sweeter. She never stops being worth it. Jennifer Jason Leigh. She was the actress Hollywood could never quite categorize, and she never seemed to care. Jennifer Jason Leigh, at 64, has built one of the most fearless, stubbornly singular careers in American cinema, entirely on her own uncompromising terms. It began in 1982 with Fast Times at Ridgemont High, a performance of such raw, unguarded teenage vulnerability that it felt almost too real to be acting. She became the go-to actress for complicated, difficult, unlovable characters that others quietly passed on. She lost significant weight for Last Exit to Brooklyn. She disappeared completely into Mrs. Parker and The Vicious Circle. Then years passed, and the roles thinned, as they always do for women who refuse to be decorative. But 2015 brought The Hateful Eight, Quentin Tarantino again, always a reliable revealer of hidden genius. And Jennifer Jason Leigh received her long-overdue Oscar nomination. In 2026, she dominates prestige television in Netflix thrillers and the 5th season of Fargo. The industry forgot her once. It won't make that mistake again. Sophie Marceau. At 16 years old, she spent every franc she had saved, 1 million of them, to buy back her own contract from a major studio. 1 million francs gone to get her own life back. That decision tells you everything about Sophie Marceau, a woman who was never going to be owned by an industry, no matter how desperately it wanted to possess her. She had become a French national phenomenon at 14, playing Vic in La Boum in 1980, a film so beloved it essentially defined French adolescence for an entire generation. Then came The Global Crossing, Braveheart in 1995, the Bond villain in The World Is Not Enough in 1999. 2 entirely different kinds of screen royalty, delivered effortlessly. She had mastered the rarest trick, bridging French art house cinema and Hollywood spectacle without ever losing herself to either. Eventually, Hollywood's limits bored her, and she returned to France to write, direct, and create. At 59 in 2026, she stunned at Paris Fashion Week and released her latest book, Freedom. She figured out early was always the better career. Pamela Anderson. For years, the world decided who Pamela Anderson was. and she had very little say in the matter. The red swimsuit, the slow-motion run, the leaked tape that the internet weaponized before most people even knew what the internet was. She was the most famous woman on the planet in the 1990s, trapped inside an image built entirely around the male gaze. And she smiled through all of it because the alternative was to be erased. As C.J. Parker in Baywatch from 1992, she made that show the most watched program on Earth. But what the ratings didn't capture was the real person underneath. Someone smarter, funnier, and far more complicated than the tabloids had any interest in printing. Then the 2020s arrived and gave her something extraordinary, the chance to tell her own story, Pamela, a love story. Her memoir, Love, Pamela. Her Golden Globe buzz for The Last Showgirl. At 58, makeup-free and completely herself, Pamela Anderson is experiencing the most powerful reinvention in Hollywood history, one where she finally holds every single pen. Sigourney Weaver. Before 1979, no one had ever watched a woman fight a monster alone in deep space and fully believed she would win. Sigourney Weaver changed that permanently. As Ellen Ripley in Alien, she didn't just play a female action hero. She invented the template for every strong woman who came after her, standing 6 feet tall with a quiet, commanding authority that never needed to announce itself. She made science fiction feel genuinely, dangerously real. She even chose her own name. At 14, she plucked Sigourney from a minor Gatsby character because she decided Susan didn't fit the person she intended to become. That is the kind of clarity most people spend their whole lives searching for. Ghostbusters, Gorillas in the Mist, Working Girl. She moved between genres with sovereign ease, collecting nominations and redefining what screen authority could look like for women. At 76 in 2026, she is filming Avatar sequels, was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award in Venice, and remains as formidably present as ever. Some careers don't age, they simply deepen. Renee Russo. A talent scout spotted her at a Rolling Stones concert in 1972, just a girl in a crowd. And somehow that was enough to launch a modeling career that would carry her through an entire decade. But Renee Russo always wanted more than a camera pointed at her face. She transitioned deliberately into acting, arriving in Major League in 1989, and immediately signaling she had something rare, genuine, grounded screen authority. What followed was a decade of remarkable achievement. Lethal Weapon 3, Outbreak, The Thomas Crown Affair, where she played women who were actual equals to their male co-stars in age, intelligence, and desire. Then she stepped back quietly to deal with something deeply personal, a lifelong battle with bipolar disorder she hadn't yet shared publicly. When she returned in Nightcrawler in 2014, the performance was chilling, predatory, absolutely masterful. At 72 in 2026, Renee Russo works selectively and advocates for mental health with the same quiet authority she brought to every role. While some people simply get better with time. Terry Hatcher. Before Clark Kent ever noticed her, Terry Hatcher was on a football field in San Francisco, cheering for the 49ers. That detail feels almost like a plot twist for a woman who would go on to become Lois Lane herself, the sharpest, most modern version of the character ever put on television. From 1993 to 1997, Lois and Clark made her a weekly household presence, blending quick wit with a physical, disarming comedy that felt entirely natural. Then came Tomorrow Never Dies, the Bond film. Then came Desperate Housewives, a second enormous wave of fame and a Golden Globe to go with it. But in 2006, she did something that required a completely different kind of courage. She spoke publicly about surviving childhood sexual abuse, using her own story as testimony that helped convict her abuser. Lange, the actress who had made millions laugh, had been carrying something unspeakable for decades. In 2026, at 61, Terry Hatcher hosts her own lifestyle series and stars in Whiskers and Wine. Her bravery off-screen turned out to be her greatest, most enduring performance. Geena Davis. She took up archery at 43 and nearly made the United States Olympic team. That's not a quirky fun fact. That is Geena Davis in miniature, a woman who picks up a sport at an age when most people have stopped starting things and nearly becomes an Olympian. She arrived on screen in Beetlejuice in 1988 and won the Oscar for The Accidental Tourist the same year, announcing herself as an actress of formidable range. Then, Thelma and Louise in 1991 turned her into something bigger than a star, a symbol, a feminist rallying cry. 2 women, 1 car, the open road, and the absolute refusal to go back. But the massive box office failure of Cutthroat Island in 1995 cooled Hollywood's appetite for her as an action lead almost overnight. She redirected that energy into something more lasting, founding the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media, fighting for representation with actual data. In 2026, at 70, she stars in Netflix's The Boroughs and remains one of Hollywood's most powerful advocates. 6 feet tall and entirely unstoppable, Daryl Hannah. She is missing the tip of her left index finger, a childhood accident she hid with prosthetics for most of her career because Hollywood had no tolerance for imperfection. That small, quiet detail says everything about what Daryl Hannah navigated her entire working life. She had been diagnosed with autism as a child, and the relentless social demands of fame were genuinely terrifying, a truth the industry consistently misread as aloofness or difficulty. But none of that showed on screen. As Madison in Splash in 1984, she created the definitive mermaid of modern cinema. In Blade Runner, she haunted. In Wall Street and Steel Magnolias, she held her own amongst legends. Then, with quiet, absolute conviction, she walked away from the spotlight and toward the earth, arrested at pipeline protests, living off-grid, choosing the planet over the career. In 2026, at 65, she lives with Neil Young in Colorado, recently publishing a viral response correcting false stories about her past. Some people become themselves by leaving. Daryl Hannah left and finally arrived. Jessica Lange. She was the girl in King Kong's Fist in 1976, and the critics were brutal. They saw a beautiful face in a monster movie and assumed that was the full story. They were spectacularly wrong. Jessica Lange spent the years that followed building one of the most decorated careers in Hollywood history. Frances, Tootsie, Blue Sky, Cape Fear, 2 Oscars, 5 nominations, and a quality in her eyes, haunted, barely contained, that made every character feel like someone carrying impossible memories. She had once lived as a bohemian in Paris, studying mime. That restlessness, that refusal to settle, never left her. When leading roles thinned with age, Ryan Murphy handed her a new kingdom in American Horror Story, and she seized it with both hands, playing grotesque, magnificent roles with the relish of someone who had absolutely nothing left to prove. At 77 in 2026, she celebrated a career retrospective at the Dublin Film Festival and continues on Broadway and Mother Play. The critics from 1976 owe her a very long overdue apology. A Melanie Griffith. Growing up, she had a pet lion, a real, full-grown lion named Neil, who lived inside the family home. A fact so extraordinary it was documented on film. Melanie Griffith's life has always operated just slightly outside the boundaries of what most people would consider normal, and that quality made her extraordinary on screen. In Working Girl in 1988, she became the anthem for every woman fighting to be taken seriously in a world that kept handing her a coffee cup instead of a promotion. That performance, the big hair, the small voice hiding huge ambitions, earned her an Oscar nomination and made her the symbol of an entire era's aspirations. She and Antonio Banderas became one of Hollywood's most intensely scrutinized couples. But long-term addiction and multiple visits to rehab took a quiet, heavy toll. The tabloids documented her plastic surgeries with a cruelty they never applied to her male contemporaries. In 2026, at 68, she lives a quieter life centered on family, including daughter Dakota Johnson, occasionally voice acting, The Lion Tamer, finally resting, Ali Sheedy. She published her first book at 12 years old, a children's novel called She Was Nice to Mice, and it became a bestseller. That detail is almost too symbolic for the girl who would grow up giving a voice to every teenager who ever felt misunderstood or invisible. As Allison Reynolds in The Breakfast Club in 1985, the black layers, the dandruff, the fierce, silent dignity, Ali Sheedy created something cinema rarely manages, a character who made misfits feel genuinely seen. Or she moved through the Brat Pack era, collecting devoted fans who recognized themselves in every role. Then, Hollywood's attention drifted, as it always does. But in 1998, the independent film High Art gave her space for a performance of such profound complexity that critics who had quietly underestimated her were suddenly paying very close attention. In 2026, at 63, she teaches acting at City College of New York, stars in Single Drunk Female, and mentors the next generation of artistic outsiders. The girl who spoke for the misfits is now shaping what comes after them. Juliette Binoche. She turned down 3 different roles offered by Steven Spielberg. 3. For most actresses, one polite refusal would already be an act of extraordinary courage. For Juliette Binoche, it was simply a matter of principle, and principle has always mattered more than box office. Known simply as La Binoche, she arrived internationally in The Unbearable Lightness of Being in 1988, bringing a vulnerable emotional intelligence that instantly separated her from Hollywood's usual machinery. Three colors. Blue in 1993 was a masterpiece of pure interiority. The English Patient in 1996 brought her the Oscar. And through it all, she maintained something vanishingly rare: absolute artistic control over the work she attached herself to. She is also a professional painter. She created the actual artwork in The Lovers on the Bridge and designs her own film posters. In 2026, at 62, she competed at the Berlin International Film Festival with Queen at Sea, earning the kind of critical acclaim that seems to follow her like a quiet, unpersistent light. The industry needs her considerably more than she has ever needed it. Andie MacDowell. Her voice was dubbed by Glenn Close in her very first major film. That indignity, having your own sound replaced before you'd had a single chance to prove yourself, would have defeated most people. Andie MacDowell turned it into fuel. By 1989, in Sex, Lies, and Videotape, she had the quiet last laugh, a Golden Globe nomination, and critical acclaim that erased every early doubt. What followed was a decade of romantic perfection: Green Card, Groundhog Day, 4 Weddings, and a Funeral, where her southern warmth made her one of the most beloved faces in cinema. Then age did what Hollywood always allows it to do to women: thinned the roles, narrowed the options. But she refused to disappear or to pretend. She let her hair go silver and became more visible than ever, a quiet act of defiance that resonated across a generation of women tired of shrinking themselves. In 2026, at 68, she stars in the final season of The Way Home and has been a L'Oreal ambassador for 40 consecutive years. Still speaking, still radiant. Annette Bening. She used to cook meals on a charter boat in the Pacific Ocean to pay her way through acting school. That image, Annette Bening, scrubbing pots at sea, dreaming of something she couldn't yet name, feels almost too cinematic to be real. But it is, and it explains everything about the quiet, bedrock determination underneath one of Hollywood's most steadily magnificent careers. She arrived in 1990 with The Grifters, her Oscar nomination arriving with her very first significant role, which almost never happens, and the industry immediately understood it was dealing with something rare. American Beauty in 1999 turned her Carolyn Burnham into a haunted, furiously fragile portrait of a woman unraveling inside a perfect life, and cinema has never quite recovered. She earned 5 Oscar nominations and somehow never won, a fact that audiences found increasingly baffling each passing year. In 2026, at 67, she stars in The Bride, playing a scientist described as sexy and anti-establishment. She and Warren Beatty remain Hollywood's most admired love story. The boat was worth every wave. Holly Hunter. She is deaf in her left ear. Has been since childhood. And yet Holly Hunter became one of cinema's most celebrated practitioners of the art of listening, of stillness, of presence, of hearing everything in a scene while appearing to hear nothing at all. She won the Oscar for playing a mute woman in The Piano in 1993. That same year, she was also nominated for The Firm. 2 nominations, 1 year, 0 silence about what she was capable of. She had already announced herself in broadcast news in 1987 as the definitive portrait of professional anxiety. High speed, brilliant, perpetually on the edge of something uncontrollable. What followed was a career of extraordinary selectivity and consistent brilliance, even as Hollywood's appetite for complex women in their 40s and 50s noticeably dimmed. She took roles sometimes just for the paycheck, she admitted honestly, to stay working. In 2026, at 68, she plays Chancellor Nala Ake in Star Trek, Starfleet Academy on Paramount+. From indie darling to outer space, Holly Hunter characteristically finds it entirely natural,